Salutare prieteni, o să fac o scurtă introducere în limba română și apoi voi trece la limba engleză, pentru că invitatul meu de astăzi este profesorul Patrick J Deenen, care vine din Statele Unite ale Americii și care va susține o prelegere în cadrul Matthias Corvinus Collegium, care va fi, să spunem, concentrată pe o dispută veche de când lumea, elite versus populiști, și de aceea, pentru a ușura dialogul, vom derula acest interviu în limba lui Shakespeare. Thank you, Professor, for being present here in Via Cluj TV studio.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You are preparing a lecture about elites versus populism or populist. It is a very old issue. How do you see it today in our context?
Yeah, it's a very old issue that has reappeared. It's at least as old as the oldest political philosophers have written about. So you read Plato or Aristotle in the ancient Greek times, or Cicero in Roman times, and the problem of politics tends to come down to the divide between the many and the few. And the many are often economically less wealthy, they're often socially less prestigious, they often don't run their society. The few often are wealthier, or the elites are often the wealthy, they're often the most powerful, they control the military. But sometimes the populace rise up and they overthrow the elites. So the question for these ancient philosophers was, can we have something other than civil war as the basis of our society? And one alternative is tyranny. One side tyrannizes over the other. That's how you can create peace. And the other option is to create a kind of peace, a genuine peace between these two classes. And what I really want to talk about on Thursday evening is ways of thinking about creating peace that's neither civil war, obviously, nor tyranny. And I think we're in some danger in the West today because we have forgotten the teachings of these classical philosophers who really sought to foster and to explore the conditions of peaceful coexistence between what we would today call the elites still, and what we would today still call the populists, or the demos, the many. So my thinking about this, and I have a book coming out in June in the United States, is to revisit the classical idea of how to take the best elements of the elites and the best elements of the people, and to help them to correct the worst elements of the elites and the worst elements of the demos. And this was, of course, the classical teaching. It was called mixed constitution or mixed regime. And this is really the effort of my thinking in this book and for the lecture here in Transylvania.
In Romania, we experienced during the communism the situation of the tyranny, because we had Marxist regime, a communist regime, who, I don't know, killed many members of the Romanian elite, also to who tried to exile the rest of the Romanian elite or to destroy it physically. And we know that tyranny is not a solution to acquire the social peace. But how can we negotiate the social peace, the mutual understanding between the populist and the members of a local elite?
Yeah. So I think today many people, and I'm speaking now maybe more specifically about the United States, but I think this is also true in parts of Europe. I think it's true, for example, in the way figures in the European Union think, Brussels. There is, our politics are becoming defined by the belief that the only way to end the Civil War is to achieve unconditional surrender from the other side, right? This is the approach of, we could say, Brussels when it comes to populists. This is the approach of progressives in America when it comes to politics. But it's also the approach of the the populists who want to overthrow the elites, right? It's a kind of revolution from below. And in the United States today, people who supported Donald Trump, for example, really think that what has to happen is to basically overthrow the elites. So it has a kind of interesting echo to a Marxist world in which you can have one side completely dominate the other side, right? And in Marx's theory, the revolution of the people would result in peace because you would eliminate the old elite and you would have no more elite.
Was the same situation with
of course that didn't happen, right? Yeah.
In Romania, we experienced a fascist dictator led by Mișcarea Legionară, a fascist movement in Mussolini style, who proclaimed a national revolution to overthrow the old elite, the old democratic elite built in the times in where Romania was a monarchy. So I think in interesting ways we now have a kind of practical politics that's forgotten a very old teaching, which is that you can't get rid of the elites. There's always going to be elites. When I arrived here on Sunday, I was taken to I believe it's the Hungarian Theater here in the city, to watch a production of Animal Farm, the great short novel by George Orwell. And that's the teaching of George Orwell, who observed and witnessed the rise of communism and the practice of communism, which claimed to be about the elimination of the elite and the creation of a perfectly egalitarian society, but in fact resulted in a new elite, a new dictatorship in a way, a new tyranny. I think this is why I think there's a wisdom in the pre-modern tradition. And if we reach back to the pre-modern tradition, these thinkers I mentioned, whose names I mentioned, so Aristotle is one, Cicero is another, Polybius is a great author about the idea of a mixed constitution. Thomas Aquinas writes about the idea of a mixed constitution, influenced by Polybius. But also Alexis de Tocqueville.
That was the person I was just going to mention, was Alexis de Tocqueville in his great book, Democracy in America. And what all of these thinkers understood is that there are certain virtues that are kind of inherent in any elite. And what are those virtues? I think we could define them in many ways as the benefits that come from a certain status or rank, such as leisure, education, culture, art, the development of these kinds of elevating qualities that tend to be available especially to an elite. And the virtues of the people tends to be hard work. So if your viewers know the play Animal House,
yeah.
Animal Farm, the figure of the people is represented by Boxer, the horse,
yeah.
who's very hardworking, right? Who's really an admirable character, but doesn't know when to stop in some ways. But hard work, a kind of discipline that comes from the world, right? The limits of the world as well as the possibilities of the world. So if you're a farmer, you know how the world works. You know how soil, right, will give birth to new crops and how to work the earth. There's a kind of wisdom that comes from the common, ordinary experience, and we call it, in English, we call it common sense. It's not high wisdom, it's everyday knowledge of how things work. It turns out that the virtue of each also tends to be the weakness of the other, right? So that common and ordinary people tend not to have high culture. They can have low culture, which can be good, but they can benefit from high culture and the benefits of that come from a leisured class. So when you walk around Cluj, you see everywhere at least evidence of what was once the aristocratic society, the Habsburg Empire, and you see beautiful buildings and sculptures, and you see
aristocracy during the Kingdom of Romania times.
Yeah. So you have this, these buildings and this art and this public culture that was the creation of, and it benefited the elite class. But frankly, it was also a kind of public utility, right? Everyone could enjoy the beauty of these places.
I'm totally agree with you, because our society knows after 5 decades of the communism that it's better to have an old-style aristocracy rather than having a nomenclatura.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is something, in a way, we need to learn, which is the modern democratic liberal order is deeply suspicious of and even antithetical to the idea of aristocracy. I think we actually need a revival of a good form of aristocracy, which in the Greek just means rule of the fine or the excellent. So in the first place, we need to push against the idea that we're going to have a completely egalitarian society, which, as you know, I think the 20th century should teach us this will never happen. Even communism, which claims to be a leveling society, still has a kind of elite. But we need an elite whose contributions to the social order are beneficial to ordinary people. And in particular, and this is really the theme of my lecture, in particular, ordinary people tend to thrive, especially in conditions of social stability, and even a kind of economic stability. In other words, an economy that's not completely disrupting lives all the time, that can provide good jobs that are steady, that are long-lasting, that can be done over the course sometimes of a lifetime or a big part of a lifetime, that are predictable. It's the kind of economy that's constantly changing and transforming that's really beneficial to a small number of people that we see, right, who are the global internationalist cosmopolitans who benefit from a high-tech, you know, constantly changing, transforming economy, and who also seek a kind of disruptive social order, right, where the old forms, whether it's traditional family life or traditional forms of community, where these are now seen as a problem. So I think we have an elite now that is actually hostile to the conditions of stability that are beneficial to ordinary people. So what's interesting is, contrary to Marx's theory, the most revolutionary class in our society today are the elites. They are the ones who are fostering the revolution. And when we think of populism, in an interesting way, it's a revolution against revolution. It's an uprising against revolutionary conditions. And this makes it an interesting moment in which the ordinary citizens in some ways are saying, we want something like an old aristocracy. We want something like an old aristocracy who was responsible for conditions of stability and continuity, and who regarded their benefits as also a kind of public, contributing to a public culture that benefited all of us.
In Romania, after the Second World War, our constitutional monarchy was destroyed by Russians, by the communists, by Soviets, and now a large part of the Romanian society is in favor of restoring the monarchy, me included. And I am amazed by the fact that never, after the fall of the communism, United States never tried to rebuild constitutional monarchies in countries like Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya, where the era of constitutional monarchies was much better than all these kind of revolutionaries regimes who were built, no matter if they were Marxist or Islamist or I don't know what kind of revolutionary regimes were built there. Why that?
Well, in particular, the United States and Britain are today, they're liberal democracies. In other words, their base philosophic principle is that, especially the United States, is that monarchy is inherently unjust in a way, because it's not chosen or selected by consent. It's inherited. Right? Of course, England is different, but in the United States, there's a strong hostility to the idea of any position being the result of inheritance.
But practically, there are no, I don't know, differences between the Windsor dynasty and the Bush dynasty, for example.
Yeah, so in theory, of course, they're against inheritance. In practice, it turns out that liberal democracy produces a kind of corrupt aristocratic class. And it is a corrupt, I strongly believe that what we are experiencing in the West is a deeply corrupt new elite. And the new elite, unlike maybe some parts of the old aristocracy, largely think that they have achieved their position through their own efforts, even when it's inherited, even when it's the result of their, their parentage and their lineage, like the Bushes, even when it's the consequence of certain advantages that they receive because of who they're born to and the kinds of benefits and advantages they receive. The belief of the modern liberal elite is that they have earned and that they deserve their status and position. And by contrast, those who are not economic winners and social winners, they deserve their fate. They deserve their condition. And this has exacerbated and made much worse the relationship between the elites and the populace today. And why, when Donald Trump came along, after many years of this development of this new elite, what Donald Trump said was that these people hate you, and I will be your protector. It was a kind of, the old-fashioned demagogue. I am going to be, I understand these people. I come from this class. I am, one of the wealthy people. I am going to fight against them for you. And this was a message that was very well received by ordinary citizens in the United States. And I think unless the leadership class in the Western world wants more Donald Trumps, and even worse Donald Trumps, it will have to reform itself and be reformed by both a combination of the demos and better elites.
Yeah, this is the ideal situation. In the old regime in Romania, we had a kind of Christian solidarity of the aristocracy with the demos, with the common people, and that's why we didn't have many revolutions in the old kingdom of Romania, because the elites were willing to share their wealth. The members of this aristocracy created the educational system who allow people from the demos to have an ascension to the social class, and because of this circulation of the elites was a very stable society. And I believe that in Romania or in other parts of this region, this kind of solidarity and the free access to education can be the best way to manage our societies, is my opinion.
Yeah. So I actually think, so the title of my lecture is the party, or the subtitle I think, the subtitle is The Party of Disruption versus the Party of Order. And I think this defines the new divide largely in the West. The Party of Disruption, and I use this word with some intent and awareness, has used the language of progress as its defining characteristic. And progress, I assume in English, maybe like Romanian, progress has a very positive connotation, right? Who is against progress? No one is against progress, right? And this is the word that has become, in some ways, the dominant political word to describe the politics of the elite class today. We want progress. We stand for progress. But another way of describing progress is disruption. Progress is, in some ways, to say that which we are used to needs to cease to be, and it needs to be replaced by something new, by something that we think is better, by something that will, change or transform or cease your old way of life. This is a kind of one of the facets of progress that we tend to say, okay, that's okay. Who wants to do things the old ways? Well, it turns out that for many people, doing things the old ways is actually a source of a kind of, you could say, the necessary conditions for human flourishing, especially if you're not one of the beneficiaries of this disruption. So I think that one of the ways we are likely to see our politics develop is an increasing suspicion toward those who claim that they stand only for the positive benefits of progress. And there will be a rising and increasing party of order who will offer stability. You use the word yourself, stability, continuity, a certain amount of predictability. This will, of course, be widely denounced by today's elites as backward and reactionary. But it's, you could say that this has been the human norm for most of human history, which is kind of the aim of politics is stability. What you don't want is a society that's constantly in the midst of revolution. So I think a message of stability and of order and balance, reform but not disruption, will actually become a very powerful source of political appeal and will form its own kind of opposition to the Party of Progress. This is where I think our politics are going in the West today.
Evolution, not revolution.
Yeah, gradual as opposed. And this is more in the lines of thinking of someone like Edmund Burke, who is sometimes regarded as the first conservative. Burke did not argue that there should be no change, but change should happen through a kind of gradual organic process that largely comes from the bottom up. It arises from the lives of ordinary people and not imposed in some ways from the top down. So I think we in some ways we've misunderstood our political situation because we tend to think of ourselves as living in a fairly egalitarian society. That's one of the appeals of liberal democracy. No one receives their position or status because of inheritance, at least that's the theory. But what we in fact have is a ruling class that is a revolutionary class, as I've said, right? It's always seeking to advance transformation and change, and it does so by saying that what has existed until now is unjust. What has existed until yesterday is unjust. And what are those conditions that existed until yesterday? Well, those conditions, for example, of relatively, again, stable social, traditional, cultural, national, or regional forms that are passed down from one generation to the next. And that's what people, I think, an anxiety in the West today is, who are we as a people if we don't, in some ways, receive an inheritance from the past? Who are we as human beings if something is not received from those who preceded us? And I think this is it's an anxiety and a yearning among younger people who have been given very little in terms of this kind of identity. And I think if we don't want that void to be filled with very dangerous forms of identity, I think there is a possibility of a kind of revival of a certain kind of fascism in that void. Then I think we had better think about renewal of the idea of a kind of aristocracy that's responsible to a demos that relies upon conditions of relative stability.
Once again, I'm totally agree with you. Thank you, Professor, for this interview.
You're one of the few people who agrees with me, and I'm very, very happy to have spoken with you.
There are not so few in our community. Thank you very much. Prieteni, vă mulțumesc și vouă. Ne vedem pe net.